Hello and welcome to the first ever Davis Political Review podcast. The Davis Political Review is the only nonpartisan student-run online political publication here at UC Davis, where we strive to bring you student voices and analyze world events with our unique viewpoints and perspectives. With that, we are this week's hosts. My name is Essa, and my co-host is Abigail Loomis. Abby, please introduce yourself.
My name is Abigail Loomis, and I am a third-year political science major, current copy editor-in-chief for the DPR, and I am the incoming editor-in-chief.
And I am the current editor-in-chief of the Davis Political Review and a fourth-year international relations major minoring in human rights and French. With that, this new series of podcasts is a way for us to inform the student body and general public of events happening around the world. This week, we will be starting with the 2023 French protests, or, as some call it, the New French Revolution. So, Abby, why are the French protesting?
In early 2023, President Macron proposed a pension system reform, which would increase the minimum retirement age from 62 to 64. It is important to note this is not the first time that the French president has attempted to reform the pension system. In 2019, his government attempted to simplify the pension system, having all 42 pension programs combined into one unified system, but also planned on increasing the age which workers needed to hit in order to get a full pension. This did not go well in 2019, and strikes broke out in nearly every sector. 82% of railway drivers striked, schools closed, and even air traffic controllers went on protest. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Macron decided to put the reform on the back burner. So, why does President Macron want to increase the retirement age?
Well, Abby, as always, the answer is money. The French government spends a huge amount of money on pensions, and with the increasing life expectancy, it will continue to cost more and more. This raised alarm bells for Macron, as he repeatedly expressed his concerns about the country's debt. Currently, France has around 3 trillion euros worth of debt, and the interest on that debt is roughly 51 billion euros a year. According to the Ministry of Labor, increasing the retirement age to 64 would save 22.1 billion euros by 2035, and an additional 12 billion euros in extra tax and social security revenues in 2027. Leaving the system as it is would end up increasing the debt by 500 billion euros by 2048. According to Macron and his Ministry of Labor, it is not economically viable to keep the minimum retirement age at 62. And according to the budget minister, it's reform or bankruptcy. In their view, these reforms are vital to the well-being of the country. So now that we know what constitutes the reform, why is it so controversial?
The reform's controversies go towards the way the French view their obligations to pensioners in the first place. In the US, we have Social Security that anyone and everyone accesses by 65 at the latest. However, in France, after the Second World War, the French enshrined and closely guarded their social welfare programs, like healthcare, transportation services, and most importantly, pensions. But there is nuance to why the French people are protesting, and it goes beyond pension reform. The French feel that their representative democracy has fallen out of touch with reality, and that the politicians meant to protect their interests are only protecting the interests of the rich.
President Macron has been called the president of the rich, and some of his goofs earn him that name. While discussing pension reform on a famous French interview network, Macron stupidly removed an $80,000 watch right in the middle of the interview. Previously in 2018, he also relaxed labor laws and removed a wealth tax, while increasing the tax rate on the middle class. The younger generation of French people want the same sort of rights and privileges their parents and grandparents have. And with this pension reform, alongside other laws, they believe that they are the slaves of the rich. That is why they are up in arms to fight for their right to a decent retirement and to a dignified old age, and retire with a peace of mind. But, as aforementioned, if the French government can't pay up, nobody will be able to settle down watching the sunset on the French Riviera.
Additionally, the way in which Macron has implemented the reform has generated some controversy. While France's Senate did approve the bill, Macron did not have the support needed to pass the reform in the Assembly. Knowing this, the president invoked Article 49.3 of the French Constitution, which enables the president to pass bills without the approval of the legislature, so long as the legislature does not pass a vote of no confidence, which would force the president and his cabinet to resign. The vote was raised, but it failed, and now the reform is law. Many were outraged and felt it was a violation of democracy, an abuse of power. So, what has happened during the protests?
Even though the protests appear to be losing steam, slightly, these protests have been and continue to be nothing less than history in the making. Public transportation workers have held the longest transportation strike in the country's history, completely halting the train system. On March 14th, a record 1.28 million people were out protesting. Trash collectors have halted their operations, leading to around 7,000 tons of trash laying around Paris. Labor unions, which are a very strong political force in France, have been a key player in all of this. There have been some creative forms of protests from certain individuals as well. Take, for example, French Spider-Man, aka Alain Robert, a noted free climber who scaled a nearly 500-foot skyscraper in Paris's business district with almost no equipment to protest the pension reform.
However, not all of the protests have stayed civil. Groups of protesters have stormed many business or luxury buildings carrying safety flares. President Macron's favorite restaurant was set on fire. Town halls were set ablaze, and hundreds of people have been arrested. With the law fully in place, the protests have begun to lose some of their steam and slow down, but they are still going strong. It is unclear when the protests are expected to stop, whether the bill will be repealed or whether dissent will just cool down over the next year or so. But one thing is certain, this has been a major hit to Macron's popularity in France, and it could likely cost him the next election to his main competitor, Marine Le Pen. Marine is a right-wing nationalist who is broadly seen as a threat to liberal democracy, to the delight of some but to the terror of most, and we have begun to see an increase in support for Le Pen in the aftermath of the reform. It is possible that the pension reforms could lead to a major political shift in the upcoming election, further weakening or even destroying the centrist alliance Macron has built. Regardless, the pension reforms and the ensuing protests have most definitely left their mark on France.
To recap, the French are very attached to their retirement system. The very idea of raising the retirement age was unpopular from the beginning, but the decision of President Macron to sidestep the vote in the parliament is really the straw that broke the camel's back. Since then, the people are in the streets, deputies are outraged, and the government is in a dead end, not willing to do any compromise but forced to grasp the scale of protests. The recent appearance of violence makes us fear the worst, but it is most likely that people will move on, as the laws already passed and other important issues are starting to hurt French people a lot, like rising inflation costs or the deteriorating status of their healthcare system. This movement is the start of a larger push against politicians who place the interests of the rich over the working man, and only time will tell the fate of Macron and his government.
And that's it from us. Thank you for listening to the inaugural episode of the Davis Political Review podcast, and we can't wait to see you next week. All sources can be found in the show notes. Have a great day.